Willie James Mullis was sentenced to death for the murder of his 3-month-old son, Aaliyah.
You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.
All right, let's check out these death row inmates.
So the burning question on everyone's mind was, who could do such a thing to a woman loved by so many? Who would shatter this idyllic life?
Kenneth Eugene Smith, State, Alabama. Kenneth Eugene Smith was convicted in 1989 for his role in the murder of Elizabeth Sennett, the wife of a preacher, in what was a contract killing for $1,000.
So we up in the church right now. We up in the church, guys. It seems like it's always some drama when you up in the church.
Smith, along with an accomplice, brutally stabbed Sennett in her own home. His capture and trial led to a death sentence, though his execution was delayed for over 3 decades due to appeals and legal proceedings.
3 decades sitting on death row. It's crazy.
On January 25, 2024, after 35 years in prison, Kenneth Eugene Smith became the first person to be executed using nitrogen gas, a method never before used anywhere in the world. In his final hours, he was visited by family, friends, his attorney, and a spiritual advisor. For his last meal, he chose a hearty plate: steak, eggs, and fries.
All right, what would your last meal be? Okay, I'm looking more towards crab legs and lobster, but he wanted some French fries, steak, and eggs.
When the time for execution arrived, Smith was secured to the gurney while witnesses observed from the viewing room. A mask was placed over his face, and as the flow of pure nitrogen was activated, his body began to convulse, a process that lasted several minutes. Finally, his breathing stopped, and his death was confirmed. Before he died, his final words were, "There is no justice in this."
When the cops arrived, the scene was grim. No sign of a pulse on Elizabeth, yet by some miracle, she was clinging to life by the thinnest thread. The EMTs found a whisper of a heartbeat and didn't waste a second getting her to the hospital, racing against time to pull her back from the edge. Now,
So that was the lady that he killed, okay? He thought he had killed her at the house, but he didn't. She made it to the ambulance, but I don't think she made it to the hospital.
you'd think her husband would be over the moon at the news, right? But get this. The guy nearly hit the deck when he heard his wife's heart was still beating. Odd, don't you think? One of the detectives hopped into the ambulance, hoping against hope Elizabeth might spill some crucial detail on the ride. But sadly, she never got the chance. The hospital declared her gone not long after they arrived. Chuck Sennett, her oldest boy at 25 and serving in the Navy, was floored. He was used to checking in with his mom almost every day. And then there's Mike, the younger brother, who was 23. He got the kind of call at work that turns your whole world upside down. Something's gone down at the farm with Mom. Get there fast. The investigators turned that crime scene inside out for days. And let me tell you, things weren't adding up. It was made to look like a burglary gone sideways, but Elizabeth's purse was still there with $400 untouched. Only a VCR and a stereo were missing amidst all that chaos.
Okay. All right. This is sad. Up in the church. You gonna kill a church lady. Ain't nothing good gonna come to you killing a church lady.
It made 0 sense, or did it? Sometimes the truth is hiding in plain sight. You just gotta know where to look. And the cops were looking at her husband. Reverend Charles Sennett Sr., the man behind the pulpit at Westfield Church of
Not the Reverend.
Christ in charming Sheffield, was a familiar face around town. His wife Elizabeth was the epitome of the pastor's wife. A bit on the quiet side, a true American homemaker, teaching the boys the difference between right and wrong with a soft touch. With the kids off making their own way in the world, Charles and Elizabeth lived a simple life, getting by on what Charles made from his sermons and a handful of rental properties and investments they had here and there. But here's where the plot thickens. Charles was leading a double life, buried under a mountain of debt that soared to $200,000.
Charles was leading a double life. Okay, the husband of the lady who got killed was leading a double life.
He was also tangled up in a love affair with a woman from his own congregation.
Boom. All up in the pulpit. All up in the pulpit.
He confided in her, pouring out his unhappiness and dreaming of a fresh start together. To top it off, Charles borrowed $3,000 from her, claiming it was to square off a bank loan. Little did she know the cash had a much more sinister purpose.
So the Reverend borrowed money from his girlfriend. Let's see for what reason.
That money found its way into the hands of one of his tenants, Billy Gray Williams. Charles had a dark request for Billy, to make someone disappear. Billy, just 21, passed the grim task on to two guys he went to high school with, John Forrest Parker and Kenneth Eugene Smith, aged 19 and 22. Their price? A cool $1,000 each. So picture this.
$1,000 to kill a church lady. $1,000 a piece. $2,000. You got to be crazy.
It's March 17th, 1988, and Billy hands John a crisp $100 bill meant for a weapon. But John, he's got other plans and blows it all on drugs, figuring his trusty old hunting knife will do the trick just.
John can't pay attention to details. He was supposed to buy a gun, but instead he smoked that up, and he said he was going to use his knife instead.
Fine. The next day, he's cruising to the Senate farm with Kenny Smith in the passenger seat. Kenny's busy sharpening that knife like they're heading to a barbecue, not about to commit a horrific crime. They roll up to the Senate's place and feed Elizabeth a line about Charles giving them permission to scope out the land for hunting. Elizabeth, none the wiser, just shrugs and lets them be. After putting on a bit of a show wandering around the property, they come knocking, asking to use her bathroom. Inside, John slips on some cotton socks over his hands, not for warmth, but for what comes next.
So y'all about to kill the church lady. Okay, here we go.
The scene that unfolds is something out of a nightmare. John and Kenny, they don't just attack Elizabeth, they unleash a fury, ignoring her pleas for mercy until she's just a still figure on the floor. Then, to make it look like a robbery, they smash up the medicine cabinet and grab a stereo and a VCR.
So $1,000 a piece, a stereo, and a VCR.
Murder weapons dumped in the pond out back. The stereo ditched on their drive back to Florence, but Kenny, he decides to keep the VCR like some kind of twisted trophy. Flush with the $1,900 they were owed, they're patting themselves on the back, thinking they've just pulled off the slickest move. But they didn't. Not even close. The moment Elizabeth Sennett's case hits their desks, detectives had their eyes on Pastor Sennett. I mean, it's pretty standard stuff in cases like this to check out the spouse, right? But then...
Yeah, you look at the spouse first in these types of situations. I can't believe they killed the church lady.
Then they stumble on a major red flag. The good pastor had recently taken out a hefty life insurance policy on Elizabeth. Now, everyone's asking, could Mr. Community Leader himself have a dark side? But he had an alibi. He was at church surrounded by his flock when the tragedy struck. Maybe the timing of the insurance policy was just a coincidence. But
y'all was going to do this to the first lady. Ain't nothing good is going to come out of this. Doing this to the first lady.
Then you remember what Agatha Christie said about coincidences. 1, maybe you shrug it off. 2, you start to wonder. 3, well, you're on to something. And the detectives were about to hit the coincidence jackpot. Out of the blue, Billy, Kenny, and John's names pop up thanks to a tip called into Crime Stoppers. And just when Pastor Sennett thought he'd danced around the questions, a casual mention of Kenny Smith's name has him blushing like a tomato. Bing.
It's some dumb criminals in the world. For sure, it's a dumb How did you think you're going to get away with killing the first lady?
Go. With the tip, the insurance, the mountain of debt, and a secret love affair all piling up, the jig was up for Charles Sennett. He knew it, and so did the cops. Rattled by the interrogation, Charles headed home to a house full of family. That's when he dropped the bombshell about the affair, telling them he'd flunked a lie detector test and confessed to having a hand in the unthinkable. Then
So you had to go home to your children. The pastor went home to his children and told them he hired somebody to kill their mother, the first lady.
And in a tragic twist, he stepped out to his old pickup and took his own life. In
Boom.
the blink of an eye, the Senate boys were left to pick up the pieces, losing both parents in a week's nightmare. It's the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people in your life. After connecting the dots, the cops got the green light to search Kenny's place. And guess what they found?
What?
Yep. The
What?
Senate's very own VCR was sitting right there like it was waiting to be discovered.
Dumb criminals. Two dummies.
It wasn't long before Kenny and John spilled the beans, pointing their fingers straight at Billy Williams. And Billy, he didn't hesitate to loop Pastor Sennett into the mess. But by that point, Charles had already let the cat out of the bag with his confession, so it wasn't exactly a newsflash.
So he thought he was about to snitch on the pastor, but the pastor had beat him to it. Okay, we got another crybaby in the house. We got another crybaby.
Eugene Cantu, State, Texas.
Come on, Evan. What'd Evan do?
In 2001, Eugene Cantu was convicted of the brutal murder of his cousin, 27-year-old James Mosqueda, and his fiancée, 22-year-old Amy Kitchen, a crime that shook Dallas. Prosecutors claimed Cantu shot both victims during a robbery attempt and then tried to cover it up. But for years, he maintained his
How you gonna rob your own cousin? That's crazy. How you gonna rob your own cousin, okay? You know you can't leave them alive.
innocence, insisting he had been framed and had nothing to do with the murders.
Okay.
After spending more than 2 decades behind bars and making multiple attempts to overturn his sentence, Texas carried out his execution on February 28, 2024, by lethal injection.
Okay, we got another one that bites the dust.
Unlike other states where death row inmates can request a special last meal, Texas has a strict policy.
Okay.
Prisoners receive the same meal as everyone else.
Texas is cheap. they say you gonna eat the same thing that everybody else is eating.
This rule was put in place after a previous inmate ordered an elaborate last meal and then refused to eat it. In his final moments,
Texas say they not about to take these special orders. You gonna eat the same thing everybody else eats.
Cantu turned to the victims' families and once again declared his innocence. His last words were clear and firm. I want you to know that I never killed James and Amy.
Okay.
I don't believe this will bring you closure. A few hours later, doctors confirmed his death.
All right. Let's see what he did. Okay, we got another crybaby. Another crybaby
Willie
in the
James
house.
Pye,
Willie,
State, Georgia.
Georgia.
Willie James Pye spent 27 years on death row after being convicted in 1996 for the brutal murder of Alicia Lynn Yarbrough. The victim, with whom he had an on and off relationship, was kidnapped, raped, and murdered in
He kidnapped his ex-girlfriend, raped and murdered her.
1993. In addition to homicide, Pye was found guilty of kidnapping with injury, armed robbery, and burglary.
Boom.
DNA evidence and witness testimony led to his death sentence. In his final hours, Willie James Pye was given a large last meal. His tray included 2 chicken sandwiches, 2 cheeseburgers,
Willie is hungry. Damn. That's 4 sandwiches, 2 large fries, and 2 drinks. Willie can put it away.
a serving of fries, 2 bags of plain chips, and 2 lemon lime sodas.
They not having that in Texas. You're not about to get all of that in Texas. Texas is not about to feed you like that.
He ate in silence. On March 20th, 2024, Georgia carried out his execution by lethal injection.
Boom.
In his final moments, he accepted a prayer, but refused to leave a recorded statement. Staring at the ceiling, and without saying a single word, he received the lethal dose.
The ceiling is not going to help you, Willie. You out of here. You killed and raped your ex-girlfriend. You gone.
Minutes later, doctors confirmed his death. Michael
okay.
Dwayne Smith,
What did Mike
State,
do?
Oklahoma.
41?
Michael Dwayne Smith was sentenced to death for a series of violent crimes that took place between 2001 and 2002 in Oklahoma City.
1 year. 1 year's time. You did all the shenanigans. And let's see what this gets you.
In November 2001, he was involved in the murder of Otis Payne Jr. During a shooting inside a vehicle. While on the run, in February 2002, he broke into the home of 41-year-old Janet Moore and fatally shot her, mistaking her for her son, whom he was hunting down, believing he was an informant.
Okay, she don't look like a guy to me. How can you mistake her for her son?
Later that same day, he killed Sarath Puluru, a convenience store clerk, after mistaking him for someone else and blaming him for making offensive comments about his gang.
Okay, it seemed like he needs some glasses. Okay, this is the second person. A mistaken identity. You need some glasses, brother.
During his years in prison, Smith followed a vegetarian diet. In the hours leading up to his execution, he broke from the tradition of requesting a special last meal, and instead ate whatever food he had left from the prison commissary.
All right.
On April 4th, 2024, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister, he was strapped to the gurney.
Okay.
When asked if he had any last words, he responded with indifference. "Nah, I'm good."
Nah, I'm good. No, you ain't good, okay? You ain't good. You about to be gone. Okay, who is this? Oh, another crybaby. We got another crybaby.
Brian Dorsey,
Not Brian.
State, Missouri.
52.
In 2019, Brian Dorsey was sentenced to death for the murder of his cousin, Sarah Bonney, and her husband, Benjamin Bonney, a crime that took place on Christmas Eve in 2006.
Come on now. You couldn't wait till after the New Year? You had to get them Christmas Eve? Come on now. That's weird.
That day, he called his cousin asking for money to pay off a debt to drug dealers. Hours later, he entered their bedroom while they were sleeping and, using a shotgun from the garage, shot them at point-blank range.
Sad.
After his arrest, he turned himself in and pleaded guilty. The sentence remained unchanged.
So you killed them and then immediately turned yourself in. The cops didn't even have to look for you. You turned yourself in. So why?
And his execution moved forward. For his last meal before being executed, he was served a large feast consisting of burgers, fried chicken, fries, and pizza.
Okay, we got somebody else that's hungry. Okay, I don't think I would have an appetite. Okay, it's about to be my last day on earth. I don't want to see no burgers, fries, chicken, pizza. I don't want to see none of that. Crab legs, none of that.
Moments before receiving the lethal injection at Bonne Terre State Prison, Dorsey shared a farewell message through his lawyers. In his final words, he expressed deep remorse and took full responsibility.
Okay.
To all the family and loved ones I share with Sarah, and to all the surviving family and loved ones of Ben, I am deeply, deeply, and overwhelmingly sorry.
Okay, at least he fessed it up. You know, he fessed up to what he did.
Words cannot contain the just weight of my guilt and shame. I still love you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I regret hurting them, and I regret hurting you.
Sad.
To my family, my friends, and all those who tried to stop this, I love you. I am grateful for you. I have peace in my heart, largely because of you, and I thank you for that. To all those on every side of this sentence, I hold no ill will or anger, only acceptance and understanding.
Okay, he said a lot more than that guy said, nah, I'm good. Okay, This guy seems like he's sincere. Okay, I feel sorry for him.
On April 10th, at 6:11 p.m. local time, the Missouri Department of Corrections confirmed his death.
Okay. Oh, we got another crybaby. We got another crybaby in the house. He crying.
Jamie Ray Mills,
Jamie,
State, Alabama.
50 years old.
Jamie Ray Mills was sentenced to death for the murder of 87-year-old Floyd Hill.
Jamie, these people are in their 80s? Seriously? You had to kill them. Are you serious?
And his 72-year-old wife, Vera Hill.
Sad.
Mills broke into the couple's home, where he brutally attacked them using a machete, a tire tool, and a ball-peen hammer.
Okay, Jamie is off the chain. He's off the chain, guys.
After the assault, he stole money and medication before fleeing the scene. Floyd died instantly due to blunt force trauma to his head and neck, while Vera survived for 12 weeks.
12
but
weeks.
ultimately
That's sad.
passed away from severe head.
She passed away 12 weeks later after he attacked her. Guys, that's sad. That's horrible. She couldn't even attend her husband's funeral.
Trauma. In 2007, a jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death.
Good.
His appeals dragged on for years, but the courts rejected each attempt to overturn the conviction.
Good.
Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall called the crime cold and calculated, and stated that Mills deserved the punishment he received.
Exactly.
Hours before his execution, Mills received his last meal,
Okay.
a seafood feast that included 3 large shrimp, 2 catfish fillets, 3 oysters, 3 onion rings, and a stuffed crab.
Okay, that looked like something I would order. That would be my last meal. But like I said, I ain't gonna be hungry, okay? Hunger is the last thing on my mind.
On May 30th, 2024, the execution took place in the William C. Holman prison chamber in Atmore, Alabama. Present in the room were his lawyer, family members, and media witnesses.
All right.
The prison warden read the death sentence before administering the lethal injection. Jamie Ray Mills did not offer any final statement before his death. DavidRHosier,
Okay, David.
State, Missouri. DavidRHosier was sentenced to death for the murder of Angela Gilpin and
So you a murderer at the age of 69. You kind of old, ain't you?
Jefferson City in 2009.
Sad.
The victim, a mother of 2, had been in a relationship with Hosier while she was separated from her husband, Rodney Gilpin. But when she decided to give her marriage another chance and ended things with Hosier, he reacted with fury.
Oh, my God.
Despite his conviction, Hosier always maintained his innocence, arguing that there was no DNA or physical evidence linking him to the crime. In his final statements to the Kansas City Star, he insisted that he regretted the deaths, but said, "You can't show remorse for something you didn't do."
True that, if that's true.
Hours before his execution, he enjoyed his last meal, a steak with a baked potato, Texas toast, apple pie, milk, and orange juice.
The steak, I'm good with the steak. That other stuff, they could have that.
On the day of his execution, June 11th, 2024, Hosier delivered a final message through his spiritual advisor.
What makes this sad is those kids. Now those kids are without a father. Without a mother. These kids are without a mother because of what he did. It's horrible. They just have their father now.
His last words reflected peace and acceptance. "I am the luckiest man on earth. I've been able to tell the truth about my innocence. I've been able to reminisce with my family and old and new friends. I've been able to become the fullest version of myself. I leave you all with love. Now I'm going to heaven. Don't cry for me. Just join me when your time comes."
That's deep. But I don't see how you lucky. You about to be out of here.
Ramiro Felix Gonzalez,
All right.
State,
Ramiro.
Texas.
41, just a baby.
Ramiro Felix Gonzalez was sentenced to death in 2006 for the rape and murder of 18-year-old Bridget Townsend in Texas.
18 years old. Ramiro, you sick. you are sick. An 18-year-old? Something wrong with you.
The crime took place in 2001 when Gonzalez kidnapped the victim, sexually assaulted her, and then shot her, leaving her body in a rural area where
Pretty
it
girl.
remained undiscovered for years. After his arrest, Gonzalez confessed to the crime and was sentenced to death.
Good. Good.
Before his execution, Gonzalez gave a final statement apologizing to Bridget Townsend's family. His last words were, "I cannot put into words the pain I've caused you, the pain I took away and can never give back. I hope this apology is enough.
No, it
I
ain't
lived
enough.
the rest of my life for you, doing my best to restore, to make amends, and to take responsibility. I never stopped praying for your forgiveness and for the chance to apologize one day." The execution took place on the evening of June 26, 2024
Bye-bye.
at 6:50 p.m.
Okay, you out of here.
Richard Norman Rojum, State, Oklahoma.
Richard.
Richard Norman
66.
Rojum Jr. was sentenced to death for the brutal murder of his ex-stepdaughter, Layla Cummings, in
Oh, my
1984.
Oh my God.
The
A
girl
baby.
disappeared on July 7th of that year, and her partially clothed, mutilated body was found in a field in Washita County.
This dude is sick. This is a baby. This dude is sick.
Near Burns Flat. Investigators determined that she had been kidnapped, raped, and stabbed to death.
Sicko.
Despite his conviction, Rojum always denied responsibility for the crime. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming,
Okay.
leading to his
Okay.
death sentence. For nearly 4 decades, he filed appeals in an attempt to avoid execution.
4 decades. Okay. What if the parents of this child never saw this man executed? 4 decades, that's a long time.
But none were successful.
Good.
In his final hours, Rojum was granted his last meal: 2 small double cheese, double pepperoni pizzas from Little Caesars, 2 cups of vanilla ice cream, and a bottle of Werner's ginger ale.
I would have gave him a Freon milkshake. Okay. A Freon milkshake. That's what I would have gave him.
On June 27th, 2024, in the Oklahoma execution chamber, Rojum was strapped to the gurney, an IV inserted into his left arm,
Good.
where a visible tattoo
Good.
remained. When asked for any final words, he simply replied, "I have none. I've already
Sick.
said my goodbyes."
Sicko.
Moments later, the lethal injection was administered and his death was certified.
No remorse. He don't have no remorse. Okay.
Keith Edmund Gavin,
Okay.
State, Alabama.
64.
Keith Edmund Gavin was sentenced to death for the murder of a delivery driver in 1998
Oh, brother.
during a failed robbery attempt in Alabama.
Another genius. Another criminal genius. You couldn't even rob the man correctly.
The victim was fatally shot when Gavin,
Sad.
acting in desperation, took his life without giving him a chance to defend himself.
Sad.
After his arrest, he was tried and found guilty. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him, and he was sentenced to death.
Good.
He spent 26 years in prison, while his attorneys filed multiple appeals, all of which were denied. In his final hours, Gavin declined a special last meal, but accepted a serving of ice cream and a can of Mountain Dew.
He's another one that I would have gave a Freon milkshake to. Okay?
On July 18th, 2024, in Alabama's execution chamber, Gavin was strapped to the gurney and connected to an
Good.
intravenous line.
Strap him.
His final words were, "I love my family." He then spoke a few phrases that, according to witnesses, sounded like Arabic. While speaking, he raised his hand, his index finger pointing upward in a symbolic gesture. Moments later, the lethal injection was administered, and his death was certified.
Good. Goodbye. Next.
Arthur Lee Burton.
Arthur, come on.
State, Texas.
54.
Arthur Lee Burton was convicted in 1998 for the murder of Nancy Adelman,
Sad.
a mother of 3,
Oh my
who
God.
went for her usual jog one summer afternoon near her
Mother of 3 went for a jog. Okay. Let's see what happens.
home in Houston. The next morning, her body was found in a wooded area next to the trail where she often ran.
Oh my God.
The investigation determined that Nancy had been strangled with her own shoelace
Sad.
and left there, abandoned in the woods. When questioned by the police, Burton initially denied any involvement, but later confessed to attacking her. Because of this, he was sentenced to death. On August 7th, 2024, Burton was executed in Texas by lethal injection.
Why did he do that? A mother of 3 going out for a jog. Why was that necessary?
Before receiving the final dose, he spoke his last words, expressing gratitude to those who had prayed for him, including some who didn't even know him. He also expressed deep regret for the pain he had caused, saying, "Bird is going home. To all the people I hurt and caused pain to, I just want you to know, I wish we didn't have to be here right now. But I want you to know that I regret putting you through this."
Why did you then? That makes no sense. You took a mother away from her 3 children. They're sick.
I hope I find peace,
For no reason.
and that you can too. Director, I'm okay. Minutes later, the lethal injection took effect, and his death was certified. Tabaron, Dave Honey,
Okay, Tabaron.
State, Utah.
48.
Tabaron. Dave Honey was sentenced to death
Tabaron looked a little off, right? Something wrong with Tabaron.
for the murder of Claudia Ben, his
Sicko.
girlfriend's mother, in July 1998.
These men killing these women knowing they got kids, you a sicko.
Court records state that Honey brutally attacked the woman inside her home and slit her throat, a crime classified as aggravated murder due to its extreme violence. After his arrest, Honey was taken to trial and sentenced to the death penalty. He spent 25 years in prison, exhausting every appeal without success.
Good.
Utah, one of the states with the fewest executions in recent decades, hadn't carried out a death sentence since 2010, making his case highly publicized. In his final hours, Honey was given his last meal, a cheeseburger, fries, and a milkshake.
Boy, they be ordering up some McDonald's when it's their final day, right? They be in McDonald's knee deep.
On August 8th, at 12:25 a.m. Mountain Time, Honey was pronounced dead after receiving a lethal injection of
Good.
pentobarbital.
You took that woman away from her child. Her child had to grow up without a mother now because of you. Bye-bye.
Witnesses described how he tapped his foot against the ground, looked around, and gasped as the drug took effect.
Good.
His body trembled momentarily, then went still. Before dying, he shared a message of redemption and change.
If you did it, good. Bye-bye.
From the beginning, if this is what it takes for you to heal, then let's do it. If they tell you you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters here, keep changing. I love you all.
Now he got all these words of wisdom. Your final hour, you got all these words of wisdom. Okay, bye-bye.
Take care of yourselves. After his final words, he thanked Randall Honey and Bart Mortensen, the prison operations director and the warden, for taking care of his family. Loran Kensley Cole, State,
Loran.
Florida.
57.
In February 1994, Loran Kensley Cole and his accomplice, William Paul, brutally attacked John Edwards and his sister, Pam Edwards, while they were camping in Ocala National Forest, Florida.
Senseless. Why did y'all have to do that? For what reason? Senseless.
After luring them away from their campsite, they beat and robbed them.
Sad.
Then, Cole slit John Edwards' throat and assaulted his sister, leaving her tied to a tree.
Sicko.
Pam managed to escape and alert the police, leading to the capture of both attackers.
So he raped her, slit her throat, and she still managed to get away to contact the police.
Paul pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison.
Good.
While Cole received the death penalty.
Good.
Cole spent 28 years on death row before being executed in Florida on August 29, 2024.
Bye-bye.
Over the years, his case went through multiple appeals, but none were successful in overturning his sentence.
Good.
In his final hours, he was given his last meal, a pizza, ice cream, M&Ms, and soda. When the time for execution arrived, Cole was strapped to the gurney with brown leather restraints, covered with a paper sheet up to his neck.
Okay.
A prison guard asked if he had any last words, to which he calmly replied, "No, sir." He looked up at the ceiling, then briefly lifted his head to glance at those who had come to witness his execution. He gave a slight nod, laid back, and waited. Moments later, the lethal injection was administered, and his death was certified.
Bye-bye. Goodbye.
Freddie Owens,
Come on, Freddie.
State, South Carolina.
Freddie, a good-looking guy. Come on, Freddie. What did Freddie do? Please tell me no.
Freddie Owens, nicknamed Khalil, was sentenced to death for the murder of a convenience store clerk in Greenville, South Carolina,
Senseless.
during a robbery in 1997.
Senseless. Come on, Freddie.
While awaiting trial in the county jail, Owens killed another inmate, strengthening the jury's
Freddie.
decision to impose the death penalty.
You killed the convenience store operator and the doggone inmate?
During the proceedings, his confession about the prison murder was read before two juries and a judge, who ultimately sentenced him to death.
Good.
After spending 25 years on death row, Owens exhausted all his appeals. On September 20th, 2024, he faced execution.
Good.
In his final hours, he received a large meal consisting of burgers, fries, a ribeye steak, chicken wings, strawberry soda, and apple pie.
Okay, these criminals be loving burgers and fries. Okay? They love them some burgers and fries, okay? All right, Freddie.
When the curtain of the execution chamber was drawn, Owens was secured to the gurney,
Okay.
his arms stretched out at his sides. He gave no final statement. As the lethal injection was administered, he exchanged a farewell glance with his attorney
Bye-bye.
and offered a faint smile. His expression remained almost unchanged before he closed his eyes and his breathing began to slow. In the following minutes, his face tensed slightly, his breaths became shallower, until he finally stopped moving.
Guys, don't get me wrong. Some of these people might be innocent. Don't get me wrong. But the ones who aren't, bye-bye.
His death was certified shortly after. Marcellus Williams,
Come on, Marcellus.
State, Missouri.
55.
Marcellus Williams was sentenced to death for the murder of Felicia Gale, a former social worker and journalist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch,
Sad.
who was repeatedly stabbed in her home in a St. Louis suburb on August 11, 1998.
Marcellus, for what reason did you have to do something like this?
From his arrest to his execution, Williams maintained his innocence. During his years in prison, his case sparked debate and appeals, centered on the lack of physical evidence linking him to the crime. However, all requests to overturn his sentence were denied, and his execution moved forward.
Boom.
On September 24th, during his final hours, Williams had a last meal of chicken wings and tater tots just before 11 a.m. He also received a visit from Imam Jalahi Kachem, who accompanied him to the execution chamber.
Okay, who was that? Who was that?
Before receiving the lethal injection, he left a handwritten statement expressing his faith and acceptance of his fate. All praise is due to Allah in every situation.
Okay, he's a Muslim. Okay, I apologize, guys. I don't know who that was. Okay, who he mentioned visited this guy, I don't know. Does anybody know?
At exactly midnight on September 24th, 2024, his death was certified.
Okay, bye.
Travis James Mullis,
Come on,
State,
Travis.
Texas.
38? Travis, you a baby. Come on, what is you doing?
Travis James Mullis was sentenced to death for the murder of his 3-month-old son, Aaliyah.
Sicko of the week. Sicko. If you did this, Travis, something is really wrong with your monkey behind.
In 2008. According to court records, Mullis, who was 21 at the time, lost control when the baby wouldn't stop crying.
Oh my God.
In an act of extreme violence, he stomped him to death,
Jesus
then
Christ.
abandoned his tiny body on the Galveston seawall.
Travis, you need some help. You need some help. You did that to your own child. You did that to a child. Something wrong with you.
A popular tourist spot south of Houston. After his arrest, Mullis confessed to the crime, saying he had reached a breaking point the day he killed his son. He was found guilty and sentenced to death,
Good.
spending 13 years in prison,
Okay.
exhausting every appeal without success.
Why are you appealing, Travis? You don't need to be appealing. Okay? That makes no sense.
Before receiving the lethal injection, Mullis used his final words to express gratitude and apologize to his loved ones, including the mother of his child and the victim's family.
See, the mother of his child, she has to be devastated. Okay? This guy is off his freaking rocker to do that to this little baby.
He also gave a special message to those who supported him, both inside and outside of prison. I want to thank everyone, especially my friends, my pen pals, and all the people who stood by me in my best and worst moments, who accepted me as the man I became. On September 24th,
The man you became. You became a murderer. What are you talking about?
2024, Mullis was executed in Texas,
Good.
less than an hour after Missouri carried out the execution of Marcellus Williams. Emmanuel Antonio Littlejohn, State, Oklahoma.
Come on, dude.
Emmanuel Antonio Littlejohn was sentenced to death for the murder of Kenneth Mears, a 31-year-old store clerk, during the robbery of the Root and Scoot convenience store in Oklahoma City in June 1992. According to prosecutors, Littlejohn and his accomplice Glenn Bethany broke into the store to rob it, and Littlejohn fired the fatal shot at Mears.
Two dummies go to rob a convenience store and take the life of that young man. Okay? And looking at this hairstyle, you could tell something's mentally wrong with this guy. He's off. He's off. Okay? He's a sandwich short of a picnic.
The years, Littlejohn maintained that he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. His lawyers argued that the prosecution used contradictory theories in separate trials, claiming in both cases that the defendant was the shooter.
Don't get me wrong, guys. Maybe not everybody in this video is guilty, but if you're guilty, bye-bye.
Even though there was only one fatal shot. While Bethany received life without parole,
Good.
Littlejohn was sentenced to death by jury decision.
Good.
His legal team also pointed out that murders committed during a robbery are rarely punished with the death penalty.
Why not?
And that if he were tried today, he would likely have received a lesser sentence. On September 26th, hours before his execution, Littlejohn had his last meal.
Okay, Littlejohn is a big boy. Okay, I know that last meal is going to be a big one. Let's see.
Meat pizza, Coca-Cola,
Oh, wow.
and 2 slices of cheesecake.
Okay.
When the final moment arrived, he was strapped to the gurney with an IV line in his right arm.
Okay.
He looked at his mother and daughter, who were present in the execution.
Sad. Now your daughter doesn't have a father. If you did this, your daughter doesn't have a father, and your mother has to be grief-stricken.
Chamber. In his last words, he sought to comfort his mother. Mom, are you okay? I'm okay, his mother, Celie Mason, replied.
Sad.
Everything's going to be fine. I love you. Minutes later.
What about the mother of that guy that you killed? If you did it, did you think about his mother?
Later, the lethal injection took effect, and his death was certified, marking the end of a legal battle that lasted more than 3 decades.
Good. Good if you did it. Good if you did it. Bye if you did it.
Alan Eugene Miller,
Come on, Alan.
State, Alabama.
59.
Alan Eugene Miller was sentenced to death for the murder of 3 men in August 1999.
Senseless. Senseless. That's a big old boy. That's a big boy right there.
Miller, who worked at Ferguson Enterprises, shot his co-workers Lee Michael Holdbrooks
Oh, my
and
God.
Christopher S. Yancey multiple times before heading to Post Air Gas, where he killed his former supervisor, Terry Lee Jarvis.
A disgruntled worker. A disgruntled worker. What is this all about?
The attack was determined to be motivated by workplace resentment, as Miller had been fired months earlier. Throughout his trial and incarceration, Miller never showed remorse and maintained his innocence.
What?
He spent 24 years in prison, exhausting every appeal.
So when you were killing these people, I'm sure there were some witnesses. So how you figure you're innocent?
Before his sentence was finally carried out. In his final hours, he was served his last meal, a hamburger steak, a baked potato, and French fries.
I'm telling you. They be wanting that McDonald's. They last days, they want a burger.
On September 26, 2024, Alan Eugene Miller was executed using nitrogen hypoxia,
Good.
a controversial method never before used in Alabama.
Goodbye.
He was secured in the execution chamber, and a mask was placed over his face to administer the gas.
If you did it, goodbye. I have no remorse for you if you did it.
Before losing consciousness, he spoke his final words. I didn't do anything to be here.
Okay.
Minutes later, the flow of nitrogen deprived him of oxygen, and his death was certified,
Okay.
marking only the second use of this method in U.S. history.
All right.
Garcia
Goodbye.
Glenn White,
Come on, Garcia.
State, Texas. Garcia
Guys, I mean, this is like the 10th person from Texas. What's up with Texas?
Glenn White was sentenced to death for the brutal murder of Bonita Edwards,
Oh, my
38
God.
years old, and her twin daughters, Annette and Burnett, 6.
Jesus Christ. You killed a mother and her twin daughters. 3 people from one family. That's what you do.
16 in Houston, Texas in 1989. White, who frequented crack houses in the city,
A crackhead.
had a relationship with Bonita Edwards and visited her on November 30th with
So the mother was in a relationship with this dude. This is crazy.
the intent to do drugs and have sex with her.
Excuse me. Oh,
When
God.
Bonita refused, White attacked her with a knife, stabbing her multiple times.
Sad.
He then went to the bedroom, where he sexually assaulted Annette, before stabbing and slashing her throat.
Sad.
Finally, he did the same to Burnett in the bathroom. On October 1st, 2024, Texas carried out his execution by lethal injection.
You did this to a mother and her twin daughters. It's sad.
While being secured to the execution table, White offered his last words directed at the victims' families. I apologize and pray that you can find peace, comfort, and tranquility in your hearts
That sucks.
for the wrong I've done
That sucks.
and the pain I've caused to you and everyone else I've hurt. I regret all the pain I've caused. He also addressed the inmates and prison staff. To all my brothers and sisters incarcerated, keep going, keep loving one another. To the administration and guards, thank you for treating us as human beings. Before he died, he thanked his family and friends. Keep your heads up, stay strong. Once again, I regret all the pain I caused anyone. I just ask that you find comfort and close your hearts. Then, in his final moments, he began singing, I Trust in God.
Don't be singing now. You gone, okay? And you need to be gone. You did that to a mother and her twin daughters. You're sick. Sick. Goodbye.
At 6:56 p.m., his death was certified, marking the end of a story marked by violence and remorse. Derek Ryan Dearman,
All right, Derek.
State,
What you
Alabama.
do? 36. What are y'all doing? You're a baby, 36 years old, killing people?
Derek Ryan Dearman was sentenced to death for the brutal murder of 5 people, including a pregnant woman in Alabama in 2016.
Come on, Derek. You off the chain. 5 people and 1 was pregnant. You need help.
In a ruthless attack, he broke into the house where his ex-girlfriend was staying and killed 5 people, including the pregnant woman. From the beginning of his legal process, Dearman admitted his guilt,
Okay.
and in 2024, he withdrew all his appeals. In a
Good.
letter sent to a judge that
Finally, somebody making some sense, okay? You know you did it. Why are you appealing? Okay, if you admitted that you did it, why do you try to appeal? Okay, so this, I applaud him. Okay, he withdrew all of his appeals.
year, he wrote, I am guilty.
Good.
It's not fair to the victims or their families to continue delaying the justice they so rightfully deserve.
Good. Now he makes some sense, even though he's cuckoo. He really makes some sense. Okay, appealing. You know you did it. Stop making these people suffer.
Hours before his death, Dearman had the chance to visit with his children, sister and father.
Now, you sat up there and killed 5 people. One lady was pregnant, okay? She'll never see her child, okay? But you get to visit with your child in the final hours. Guys, it's selfish.
For his last meal, he enjoyed a seafood tray brought from a local restaurant.
Okay.
On October 17th, 2024, in Holman,
Now, he deserved that meal because he's really one of the main ones. One of the main ones who made a little sense towards the end.
prison, he was strapped to the execution table,
Okay.
with intravenous lines placed in his arms.
Good.
In his final words, he expressed his regret and apologized to the families of his victims.
All right.
To the victims' families, please forgive me. This is not for me, it's for you. I've suffered a lot.
You
Finally,
suffered.
he addressed his loved ones.
What are you talking about? He suffered. What you do? You caused the suffering, brother.
My family, I've said it before, you know I love you. At 6:14 p.m., the lethal injection was administered,
Good.
and his death was certified.
Boom.
Richard Bernard Moore,
Come on, Richard.
State, South Carolina.
Come on, Richard. What we
On
do?
September 16th, 1999, Richard Bernard Moore attempted to rob the Nicky's store in Spartanburg to fund his cocaine addiction. At the scene, he confronted employee James Mahoney, who drew a gun, leading to a struggle in which Moore managed to wrestle the weapon away and fire unsuccessfully at a witness, Terry Haddon. Mahoney pulled out a second gun, and the two exchanged shots.
Sad.
Mahoney shot Moore in the arm, but Moore shot Mahoney in the chest, killing him.
Sad.
Moore stole
Senseless.
$1,408 before fleeing in his truck.
$408. Okay. Senseless.
But crashed into a telephone pole shortly after.
Good.
Officer Bobby Rollins found him injured, and after he surrendered, Moore confessed to the crime.
Good.
On November 1st, 2024, after more than 2 decades in prison, Richard Bernard Moore was executed by lethal injection at the Broad River Correctional Institution.
Good.
Before his death, he enjoyed a hearty last meal, consisting of steak, fried catfish and shrimp, scalloped potatoes, peas, broccoli with cheese.
No burger. Okay. You about the only one who didn't have a burger, okay?
Sweet potato pie, German chocolate cake, and grape juice.
Bye-bye.
In his final words, Moore expressed regret for the pain he caused the victim's family.
Good.
And shared a message of love for his loved ones. To Mr. Mahoney's family, I deeply regret the pain and sorrow I caused you. To my children and grandchildren, I love you, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you for the joy you've brought into my life.
People who do stuff like that, you know, especially if you have a weird last name and you have to carry on that last name of the murderer, and people figure out that you're related to that person, guys, these criminals, they don't be thinking about their families. They don't think about nobody but theyself.
To all my family and friends, old and new, thank you for your love and support. At 6:24 p.m., his death was certified.
Good.
Marking the conclusion of a case that had remained in the judicial system for over
Bye-bye.
20 years.
Bye-bye.
Carrie Dale Grayson.
Come on, Carrie.
State, Alabama.
Come on, Carrie.
Carrie Dale Grayson was sentenced to death in 1996 for the brutal murder of 37-year-old Vicky DeBlue. In 1994, Grayson and 3 friends, all teenagers at the time, picked up DeBlue while she was hitchhiking. Soon after...
Oh, that hitchhiking, guys. Stay away from that. Stay away from that hitchhiking.
They attacked and brutally murdered her.
Sickos.
While Grayson, at 19 years old at the time, received the death penalty, the other 3 co-defendants, all 18 years old, avoided execution after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled to ban the death penalty for minors.
Okay.
Hours before his death, Grayson rejected his breakfast and lunch meals,
Okay,
but accepted
whatever.
a final meal consisting of soft tacos, beef burritos, tostada, French fries, guacamole, and Mountain Dew Blast.
All right.
On November 21st, 2024, at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility, Grayson remained defiant until the end. When prison warden Terry Raybon asked if he had any final words, he responded with an insult. "Yeah, sure, you should go to hell." Authorities turned off his microphone as he continued speaking.
Ignorance. Ignorant right up until the end.
Moments later, the nitrogen gas began to flow.
Good.
Grayson violently shook and let out a brief scream.
Boom.
At 6:14 p.m., his legs lifted in the air for about 30 seconds before returning to the gurney,
Okay.
and his fists remained tightly clenched until he finally stopped moving.
All right.
The
can do
Alabama
that.
Department of Corrections dismissed his physical reactions as an exaggeration, stating that, in their opinion, the initial movements were pure theatrics.
Okay, acting a fool right up until the very end. Okay? Acting a fool, a plumb fool, right up until the very end.
His death was eventually certified, closing a case that took nearly 3 decades to fulfill. Christopher Leroy Collings,
Come on, Chris.
State, Missouri.
49.
Christopher Leroy Collings was sentenced to death for the kidnapping and murder of 9-year-old Rowan Ford.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. A 9-year-old. Okay? A 9-year-old. Something is wrong with you, Chris.
In Stella, Missouri, on November 3rd, 2007. According to his confession, he took her from her home while she was sleeping and brought her to his trailer, where he...
She's sleeping at home with her parents, I'm sure. And this fool comes and kidnaps her from her home and takes her to his trailer. A sicko.
He assaulted her before taking her life.
A sicko.
Despite several appeals, his conviction was upheld.
Why are you appealing? You know you did it. Why are you appealing? If you did it, don't ask for no appeal.
And on December 3rd, 2024, he became the 4th inmate executed in Missouri that year.
Good.
And the 23rd nationwide.
Bye-bye.
In his final hours, Collings was served his last meal, which consisted of a cheeseburger with bacon, breaded mushrooms, tater tots, and a chef's salad.
They love them burgers and them tater tots, okay? I would not be hungry, okay? If that was my last day, I wouldn't be hungry, okay? Give me some oxygen. I don't want no food.
Before his execution, he left a written message in which he accepted his fate and offered an apology.
Oh, now you want to apologize.
Right or wrong, I accept this situation as it is. To all those I have hurt in this life, I ask for forgiveness. I hope you can overcome this moment and move forward.
You had to rape a 9-year-old, okay? You had to rape a 9-year-old. You're a sicko.
He also dedicated a few words to those who knew him. No matter what side of this situation you're on, you're in my prayers. And I hope to see you in heaven someday.
You ain't going to heaven.
After receiving the lethal injection.
If you did that, you're not going to heaven. I don't know what you talking about. Okay, them tater tots that went to your brain.
His death was certified.
Good.
Joseph Edward Corcoran.
Come on, Joseph.
State, Indiana. Joseph Edward Corcoran was sentenced to death for the murder of his brother, James Corcoran, 30 years old.
Come on, you killed your own brother? Come on now, what's that all about?
And 3 of his friends, Robert Scott Turner,
4 people
Douglas
you
A. Stillwell, and Timothy G. Bricker,
4
all
people,
around the same
include
age.
your brother.
The crimes occurred on July 26, 1997, at the house he shared with his brother and sister. Since his conviction in 1999, Corcoran systematically refused to appeal his case, despite his attorneys arguing for years that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and persistent hallucinations and delusions.
Now, if you mentally ill, guys, if you really mentally ill, you're going to need some help. But if you just did this to do it, ain't nothing wrong with you, you deserve that chair, in my opinion. If you did it, there's nothing wrong with you, you deserve that chair.
In the months leading up to his execution, his defenders attempted to stop the procedure, citing his mental state, but all attempts were rejected. Hours before his death, Corcoran requested his last meal,
Okay.
a Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Oh, that's it.
On December 18th, 2024, in Indiana's execution chamber, he was asked if he had any final words. His response was brief. Actually, no. Let's get this over with.
He ready to go.
A few minutes later, the lethal injection was administered,
Boom,
and his death was certified,
boom, boom.
closing a case that had sparked controversy due to his mental health history. Kevin Ray Underwood.
Come on, Kev.
State, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Kevin Ray Underwood was sentenced to death for the 2006 murder of 10-year-old Jamie Rose Bolin in...
I'm getting sick already. I'm really getting sick. Why are y'all doing this, period? Why are you doing this to kids?
Purcell, Oklahoma. According to his confession, he lured the young girl to his apartment, where he struck her with a cutting board, suffocated her, and committed horrific acts which
Jesus
prosecutors
Christ.
said were part of a disturbing fantasy.
Oh my God.
His crime was uncovered when authorities found Jamie's body in a plastic container inside his home.
Jesus Christ.
On December 19, 2024, Underwood was executed at 10:14 a.m.
Good.
at the Oklahoma State
Goodbye.
Penitentiary. Before his death, he chose a large last meal and declined the presence of a chaplain in the execution chamber.
Sicko.
In his final words, he expressed regret for his actions. I would like to apologize again for all the terrible things I did.
You a sicko.
I hate that I did those things and wish I could take them back.
Me too.
They hate you. You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.